Pump up the jams on a subtly not so casual free Friday. It is Friday, October 20th, 2023, CFB Week 8. Knowledge for College, the Shark and the Gun, right here live on Sharky Waters Nation, X, Twitter, and YouTube. If you're on X, come on over to YouTube, chat with us. We got our guy Wine Time in the chat. Cheers up, beers down, Guns picks. What's going on, brother?
Wine Time joining us, says that's a great hat, Guns. And listen, I got to play on this UCLA game. We'll get to it in a second. But man, am I ready for a little bit of college football. Been absolutely killing it this week. Gave you 2 plays, 2 for 2. I want to continue the momentum. Let's drive this thing all the way home and sweep the board this beautiful Saturday, Week 8 edition of college football. Let's get into it.
Saturday, October 21st, it will be. Saturdays are for sending it. High noon, SEC football. Arkansas at home in Fayetteville. Huge turn-up spot. Blown out by Mississippi State last year. Revenge is in the air. It is mid-October. It is the first official of the broadcast.
Yeah, let's get a little bit of the SEC action here early. A noontime slate. I'm liking Arkansas in this spot, -5.5. Let me tell you why. Arkansas, where are they coming from? The 2-5 straight up, 4-3 against the spread, and they're on a 5-game losing streak. They are hungry for a win. They're off a loss to Alabama, 24-21 in the narrowest of margins, even though they lost a net yardage battle in that game, -165 in that regard. Now you got Mississippi State, 3-3 straight up, 1-5 against the spread this season and coming off a bye week. I always like to fade teams coming off bye weeks. I always think they come back rusty. They never come back strong. And their previous game, they did beat Western Michigan barely, I would say, for a Western Michigan team, 41-28, plus 27 net yards in that game. Now you got Mississippi State. The first 6 games in Mississippi's first 6 games, 5 of them were at home. So this is their only road game this season was against SC, and they lost 37-30, even though they won the yardage battle in that game. So last season, if you go look at the numbers from how Mississippi State did on the road, they had a -3 point differential, -28 net yard average on the road, but that 2022 team was much stronger than this one. So I just want to give you an idea how this Mississippi State team performs on the road. While Arkansas is 2-5 straight up, they are battle tested in 4 out of those 5 losses. They keep the score within 1 possession. Let me give you an example. BYU home lost 38-31, plus 143 net yards for that game. At LSU, tough place to play, right? Lost 34-31 and lost a net yardage battle in that game. At Ole Miss, tough one again. Real tough schedule for this Arkansas team, but they only lost 27-20. Then you have Bama, like last week, 24-21 at Bama in Tuscaloosa. So this is a team that can actually stay with you and keep it strong. There's a reason why this team's favored here at home. Now you got to look at the 2 common opponents on this one, Bama and LSU. Between these 2 teams, Mississippi State did play these 2 teams as well. You look at LSU at home with Mississippi State. They lost to them 41-14. And then you have Bama. They played them at home, lost to them 40-17. So you see the correlation there. You have a team that competed and a team that got absolutely blown out by these 2 opponents. Now Mississippi State has struggled versus conference opponents so far. 2 out of those games were at home. In those games, they have a -19 point differential, -113 net yard average. Their defense gives up 440 yards per game to conference opponents so far this season. This is going to be an exceptional play here for Arkansas. And Arkansas, like I said, they've lost 5 games in a row in the narrowest of margins. They are really hungry for a win. They've had the tougher schedule. They're battle tested. They played ranked opponents and they've kept it close. And there's also a revenge spot for them. If you actually look at these 2 teams from last year, Mississippi State crushed them 40-17 as 9-point favorites. Now the line is completely flipped in the other direction, and Arkansas is the favorite here, -5.5. So with all that being said, you have the revenge spot, the tougher schedule, the battle-tested team going against this shell of itself Mississippi State team since losing Coach Leach. But I'm going to be taking Arkansas in this one, -5.5, 2 unit special.
Great line there. Great line functionality stuff. And as you mentioned, I think one of the themes of this broadcast is going to be schedule quality reversal coming in conference season for a lot of these teams. Frankly, a lot of these teams have just played just the meat of their calendar the last few weeks, and it's reversing. My first play, clearing my throat on a suddenly not so casual Friday night. Tomorrow afternoon, we're taking Texas Tech on the road, Lavelle Edwards Stadium, Provo, Utah. Welcome to the Big 12, BYU, -3 official. You look at Texas Tech statistically, I think this is the crucial point here when you jump off. This team did start 1-3 ATS. They are 2-1 since, catching upward movement. 3-1 in the last four would bring them to 500 ATS, which is where they should be. Frankly, they should be better than 500 ATS. Go back to those first three non-covers. Absolutely egregious. At Wyoming, 35-33 double overtime loss. They were up 17-0 in the first quarter. Weather delay back in August. Completely lost all focus in the game. Came back after an hour or two delay. Had nothing left. Forget that. Throw it out. Slightly later on, actually not slightly later on, the following week against Oregon at home. I'm sure you guys remember this. Some of you guys had this. The Gun may have actually had this. Epic melt. 38-30. Pick six by Oregon on the final possession.
Yep.
Absolutely outrageous to not cover that game. And week 4, road conference game at West Virginia. Took a 20-13 loss. Outgained West Virginia 321-256. Just couldn't really score the ball. Just one of those games. Point being, 0-3 ATS. Fool's gold to expect that to continue. And you go to recent history, they have turned the corner. Hammered Houston at home. Welcome to the Big 12, Houston, 49-28. Hammered Baylor on the road, 39-14 in their most recent road game. Did really take it on the chin last week against Kansas State, which makes this cap even more agreeable off a blowout loss late. Crucial point, this is their third string quarterback potentially starting here. Freshman quarterback Jake Strong. They had trouble with Jake Strong coming in the game last week. 4 possessions late, 3 picks and downs in the red zone. Crucial point there, though, was accumulating yards, was moving the ball well. Kansas State with a better defense than BYU. And Guns and I were talking about this off the record. When you see this kid potentially starting the freshman on the road, laying a 3-point spread, that is heavy stuff. And we do expect Texas Tech to turn up their run game against a very poor BYU defense. Speaking of BYU very briefly, BYU is 3-0 straight up at home. They're 1-2 ATS. 3-0 straight up is very fraudulent. Did beat Sam Houston State in their first FBS game in the opener, 14-0, highly lackluster. Week 2, 41-16, FCS Southern Utah, not representative of anything. In week 5, against Cincinnati, 35-27, crucial point, it was their only home cover in conference, and it was as a favorite, -1.5. First time all year they've been an underdog at home. These teams haven't played since 1940. Guns and I were joking about it. Pre-World War II, 2023. Data abundant? I think not. Situational evaluation here. Official play, Texas Tech on the road. Let's turn up, boys. -3. MAC football, 2 o'clock. Akron taking on Bowling Green. We bought Bowling Green correctly last week. This is the classic back and forth zigzag, home to road, road to home of MAC football, and an official from the gut.
You forgot to mention that BYU is in a revenge game, because in that 1940 game, Texas Tech did win 21-20, and they were one of the better teams in college football at that time. My God, the gap on this one, 83 years, and they're bringing back that matchup. But let's talk about Akron. Let's talk about Bowling Green. Let's talk about big-time football in the MAC. What are we talking about here? Akron coming into this game 1-6 straight up, 3-4 against the spread, and off a close loss last week to Central Michigan, 17-10. Losing the net yardage battle, -105 net yards. Now you look at Bowling Green, coming into this game 3-4 straight up, 4-3 ATS, off a nice road victory versus Buffalo, 24-14, plus 54 net yards for that game. That was a revenge game for Bowling Green as well, from 2022. So take that with a grain of salt. They were supposed to win that game. Revenge teams, I think, are 22-4 if I remember that count correctly. ATS, so it's pretty strong stuff there. And now you got this is Bowling Green's third home game of the season. They played an FCS opponent and Ohio. Ohio did beat them badly at home, 38-7, with a -22 net yard average for that game. And that was a revenge game too. Ohio had to take it out on them, and they have consistently underperformed at home. They have a -10 point differential, -44 net yard average at home in 2022. and they've just continually done poorly there. They're 1-3 ATS at home as a favorite. Now you got Akron, not the best team at home, but when they're on the road, they pack their bags tightly and are ready to play and strap in. They are on a 3-1 ATS run on the road this year. They average 40 more yards of total offense. They hold their opponents to 3 yards per carry rushing, which at home they get gashed at 5.2 yards per carry and only minus 50 net yards average on the road this season. They lost by a possession or less in 3 out of their 4 road games this season. That includes some pretty strong P5 teams if you look at it from an Akron perspective. Temple, Indiana, Kentucky, and Central Michigan are the opponents that they face on the road, and they've kept it very close and competitive. Now you got a revenge game for Akron, right? Akron lost to Bowling Green in what was a revenge game for them last year, 31-28 as 9-point home dogs. Now the line is sitting at 7.5 with Akron as the away dog, but the line is reversed to the Akron side despite it being on the road. What I'm saying is it was a higher line with them being at home last year. Now it's completely reduced for them being on the road. So there's a little bit of a discrepancy in the line. Just tells me it's going to be a very close game. Very much a situational play for me on this one. Akron plays better on the road. Like I said, the 3-1 ATS this year on the road. This is a revenge factor. The line correlation favoring Akron in this spot. Plus, you got to look at Bowling Green. They just underperform at home, especially as a favorite. Like I said, 1-3 ATS as a home favorite. So I'm going to be rolling with a dog here. Give me Akron, and I got it at plus 7.5, 2-unit special.
Staying with the gun, 2 shots fired in the MAC. 3:30 p.m., Northern Illinois, showing sustained upward movement. Didn't perform particularly well out of conference, but 3-0 ATS in conference hammered Eastern Michigan last year, and the gun thinks they're going to repeat that on Saturday afternoon.
Absolutely, absolutely. This is a Northern Illinois team that we need to be backing for a little bit until the books actually catch up to their to the lines on this one, and they're on a little bit of a chip on their shoulder tour since the Akron game, I believe. When you look at these two teams, Eastern Michigan 4-3 straight up and against the spread this season, and back-to-back conference home wins over Ball State and Kent State, despite losing the net yardage battle in both of those games. Now you got Northern Illinois. They're coming in here 3-4 straight up, 4-3 against the spread, and off back-to-back conference wins themselves, beating Akron and the illustrious strongest team, arguably in the conference, Ohio, last week. Now you got to look at EMU. Like I said, they're 4-3 straight up. They have lost the net yardage battle in all of their games this year. They have a 0-point differential, minus 136 net yard average for the season. So how is this team 4-3? It's just the way the ball bounces, the luck, the turnovers. It could be a little bit of everything. But what I'm telling you is, from a yardage perspective, this EMU team is not as good as their record is. So all of EMU wins were at home, but in their road games, which they had to play Minnesota, Jacksonville State, and Central Michigan, they underperformed with a minus 14-point differential, minus 189 net yard average so far this season on the road. And then you got to look at this EMU offense. The absolutely disgusting offense that they have there. They only average 253 yards per game of total offense, 3.4 yards per carry on the ground, 5.5 yards per attempt passing, and they only complete 55% of their passes. Their offensive line is also egregious as well. They give up, they allow their opponents to 11.8% sack rate. And then what does NIU want to do? They want to run the ball. They love to run the ball. They have 4.5 yards per carry on the ground, and they average 6.9 yards per carry versus conference opponents. And those conference opponents aren't the lowest of the low in the MAC. We're talking about Toledo. We're talking about Ohio, and of course Akron. I mean, this is a team that can actually run on anybody in their conference. Then EMU's run defense, what are they? Weak sauce. They give up 5 yards per carry on the ground to their opponents, 5.2 yards per carry versus conference opponents. So you're going to see this Northern Illinois team just completely gash this EMU team up and down the field and control the clock, time of possession. And it's going to be, quite frankly, I don't think EMU is going to be able to stay with them. Then you got to look at both these teams. They meet every year. NIU winning 2 out of the last 3 straight up. Last year, NIU crushed them 39-10, plus 84 net yards in that game, but they were 3-point dogs in that one, okay? Look at the line correlation on this one. 3-point dogs a year ago, and now they're favored minus 11.5, minus 12. I think it's creeping up. This thing might even hit 14 before game time. Who knows? We'll have to see. College lines are pretty loose, in my opinion. But I think the value here is with the Northern Illinois side. Based on their matchup history, line correlation, the strength of the NIU offense versus this EMU weak defense, EMU's poor performance on the road, outcomes on the and it's just taken me to one side, and that one side is with Northern Illinois. So I'm going to be taking Northern Illinois on this one, minus 11.5, 2.5 unit special.
Taking a breath. First official collaboration play of the broadcast. We're going Pac-12, and we are going to the home squad, USC Trojans, at, I believe, 8 o'clock Eastern. That says 4 o'clock. I believe this is a night game. Let me
just check that one.
I think this is an 8 o'clock game. Not that it's entirely.
Yes, you're right. That's my fault. It is 8 o'clock.
Okay. 8 o'clock game. So you guys have all afternoon to get riled up for this game tomorrow night on the East Coast. But let's talk about this game. This game finds a USC team coming in off by far their worst outing of the year. 48-20 blowout at Notre Dame. But I think even more importantly, they are 0-4 last 4 ATS. And you could kind of see this coming. They started to really kind of play halfway ball against some of the bottom feeders in this conference. They almost lost outright to a really upstart Arizona team with this new quarterback, Noah Fifita. But they were really scaling down, and it made complete sense. We said it on this broadcast last week. We think they're probably going to lose to Notre Dame. Maybe not so emphatically, but it makes this even better of a bounce back. They weren't really classy within the game at all. And they're going to be super focused in this matchup this week. And this is really a double down on the focus. Obviously cold in recent history. Also very cold in history against Utah. Lost twice outright last year to Utah, regular season on the road, and the Pac-12 title game, and also got blown out in the 2021 regular season. 3x revenge game, strong line. Go to the Utah side of this game. Utah is very, very polarized road to home. We've already backed Utah twice this year at home, both correctly. We also faded them correctly at Oregon State. We know Utah, and we know Utah without their starting quarterback, Cameron Rising, does not travel very well at all. They are 1-1 ATS on the road. Probably should be 0-2 ATS. They did backdoor cover at Baylor in week 2. Did cover the spread by a hook. It was minus 6.5, 20-13 final. Key point, though, 2 touchdowns in the final 2 minutes of the game in the fourth quarter. I know a lot of people had Baylor in that game as a sharp take, fading Utah on the road. You guys got done pretty dirty. Out of conference stuff. That will not repeat here at Utah on this Saturday. Final point in the game. This is strong number. Regular season line functionality last year. Utah -3 at home. This is USC -5. That's an 8 gap. That suggests the expectancy is a 10-point win. We got this early week. For those of you guys who follow on Twitter and tail when we bet, that is -6.5. 7.5 may rise up tomorrow. It's getting steamed 7 now. Official play from the Shark and thrown into the gun, a collaboration spot.
Yeah, a Shark's telling you something there. That 7's a key number in betting, so you make sure you grab that 7. If you can find a 6.5, good luck. But we grabbed it at 6.5 early, and we posted it as a collaboration so everybody could jump on the line then. But let's talk about this game right now, okay? We know what USC did last week. They lost by 28 points, but that was due to -5 turnover ratio in this one. There was actually 3 touchdowns scored by Notre Dame in that game. 9 plays, 64 yards, and that was 21 points. That's all it took, and that's just because of turnovers. That's all. Turnovers in capping, in my opinion, unless you see an egregious pattern, it's usually an outlier, in my opinion. So I don't see them doing that type of stuff again. Really, you haven't seen Caleb Williams look that bad in his entire career, let alone just that game. But when you look at Utah's defense, solid all season, right? Holding their opponents to 278 yards per game of total offense, 2.5 yards per carry on the ground, 6.8 yards per attempt in the passing game. They also get to the QB with an 11.8% sack rate, but most of those results this season were at home. That's where they play their best ball. When you go into Utah, It is the toughest place to play, arguably, in college football when you look at it from a stat perspective. When you look at Utah at home, they have a plus 16 point differential, plus 97 net yard average, plus 6 turnover ratio. Okay. Great numbers. Look at them on the road. Minus 3 point differential, minus 61 net yard average, plus 1 turnover ratio. Complete different elements there from road to home splits. Now, Utah has shown some struggles offensively, especially against stronger competition. Florida, week 1, they had to go play them at home. They only put up 270 yards of total offense. UCLA at home put up 219 yards of total offense, did win that game. At Oregon State, got crushed by Oregon State, only put up 198 yards of total offense. So when they play the step up in class in the competition, Utah tends to crumble, especially when they don't get the luxury of playing in their home stadium. While USC's defense has been very publicized as being, oh, this defense is bad, it's holding them back, this is reason why USC sucks. They did give up 500 plus yards of total offense to Arizona and Colorado. I'll give you that. But what are those type of offenses? Very high explosive, high skilled, high volume scoring teams. Okay. Utah is not that. Looking at if you actually just take a step back and look at the entire window and compare it to the team's opponent's offensive season average, when they play USC, teams only average 9 yards above their offensive season average against this defense. So really, they're playing to the level of whatever these teams' averages in offenses are. It's not like you're getting 100 or 150 extra yards of offense by playing USC. You're staying right where you're supposed to be as far as your average goes. Their worst game, and then there's an outlier in there, was against Colorado, where Colorado gained 141 above their season average. And that's probably what's causing a lot of these crazy numbers. Plus, you got the double revenge game. Shark already talked about it. 2 games last year they had to play each other. 43 to 42 at Utah. 3.5 point dogs. USC was in that one. Then you have 47 to 24 in the Pac-12 championship, where they were favored. USC was favored 2.5. So I'm looking at the regular season one, and the line is flipped to minus 6.5, minus 7 in this spot, especially with them coming off that loss. So what the book's telling you is that as everybody's going to be jumping on that Utah side, you know what's going to happen. Everybody watched that game last week, seeing USC completely crumble, but they actually won the yardage battle versus Notre Dame because of all those turnovers. I think it's just the perfect spot to be jumping on USC. You have the double revenge. You have this Utah team playing poor on the road. It's a high-profile spot, perfect spot for a bounce back. Give me the Trojans on this one, minus 6.5, 3-unit special play of Saturday. Get it.
Love it. Love it. Detailed analysis right here. Sharky Waters Nation on a Friday night. Next play, we're heading to Miami, and we're taking the Miami Hurricanes at +3 against Clemson tomorrow evening as well. 8 o'clock start. There's another collaboration play. Let me jump off of it. Miami did start, excuse me, guys, 4-0 on the campaign. This is a great buy low. And one thing you will notice, all 4 of my plays this week are buying teams who lost outright last week, some with emphasis. Actually, now that I'm looking at it, all with emphasis. Every single team I'm buying this week lost by 8 or more points last week. This is the beauty of situational zigzag in conference college football. But Miami should not have lost a game 2 weeks ago at home to Georgia Tech. This is so well documented all across mainstream media. Knee the ball, you win the game. Somehow, some way, they're running the ball up the middle, fumble, proceed to give up a long, quick drive right after that to lose. One of the worst losses in college football history. Came back last week, I think understandably a little deflated off that Georgia Tech loss and against a far better opponent in UNC on the road. Now they come home. And I think off the garbage against Georgia Tech, the funeral last week, now this is where they come back and they get a huge spot here against a Clemson team that has not been great on the road this year in conference. Did take a loss in the opener, minus 12.5 at Duke, emphatically 28-7. Did beat Syracuse 31-14. You guys have seen how awful Syracuse has been in recent weeks. Probably not so much on Clemson, more so Syracuse being poor. And you go back to last year, final point before I throw it to the gun. Heightened motivation for the Hurricanes here in week 8. Took a 40-10 loss last year in Clemson, South Carolina. It was an absolute demolition. It was quarterback DJ Uiagalelei. I don't pronounce that correctly.
Uiagalelei.
Uiagalelei. He's obviously no
you
longer.
young Galele. You young Galele.
I gotta work on that, guys. I gotta work on that. But we'll just call him DJ. So it was DJ and the boys. They outgained Miami 447-98. And a lot of the reasoning behind that was Miami did not have their starting quarterback. They had their starting quarterback back now. This is a turn-up spot. It's a great line. It's a short line for Clemson. They're shortest on the road this year. The last time we faded Clemson on a short line, we took them to lose to FSU at home. This is where Miami rebounds off the nonsense and gets back on track. Taking this at +3, 1 unit. Guns, picks, alignment.
Yeah, full alignment on this one. We've got to be going with the U. It's all about the U, baby. That's what we're doing. We're doing one of these. All right, let's talk about this game here. I try not to repeat points on this one because our notes are virtually identical on this one. Miami has played well in their 2 losses. We talked about those back-to-back losses to Georgia Tech and UNC last week. But they have, if you throw those games out the window, they have a +194 net yard average for the year with a +19 point differential versus their opponents. I mean, this is still a good team that is actually playing exceptionally well. They put up 502 yards per game of total offense, and they hold their opponents to 308 yards per game of total offense, 3.1 yards per carry on the ground, 6.8 yards per attempt passing, and hold their opponents to 54.9% pass completion rate. So this is a good defense and a good offense. Now, Clemson, on the other side, they played well as far as the statistics goes, but not as good as Miami. If you compare their stats, they're only +13 point differential, +175 net yard average, putting up 463 yards of total offense, giving up 263. And then you have, where's Clemson coming from? They took a bye week. So when you look at these teams, you go, oh, yeah, extra rest. They're going to be ready for this week. No, college kids are probably just ripping rails and playing with titties and just basically wasting their week. They're going to come back sluggish. And if you actually look at the history with Clemson, when they come off a bye, it's not good. Clemson is a perfect example of a team you do not want to take after a bye. They're 0-6 ATS with rest advantage dating back to 2021. So when they have extra rest, they're not playing their best ball at all. Okay. Now consider Clemson's schedule so far. They've really played a lot of lower level teams. They played Charleston Southern, FAU, Cuse, Wake Forest. But when they play a level up into the competition, what happens? They crash and burn. They lost to Duke week 1, 28-7. Florida State at home lost 31-24. That was actually a good game, but they still lost that game. And then, of course, we already talked about it. Shark already mentioned it. The revenge factor. Miami played Clemson last season as 19-point dogs and lost 40-10. Now the line is 3.5 in this spot, or 3, depending on what books you get it at. This 15.5-point line shift from last year and now, a lot of that to me was due to the fact that Tyler Van Dyke wasn't playing in that game, and they were kind of like didn't really have an answer as far as the quarterback position was concerned. But still, it's a good spot to be taking Miami now that they're healthy and ready to go, especially coming off back-to-back losses. I think when they went from back-to-back losses, that loss from Georgia Tech was so egregious. You go into the next game and you end up losing 2 games instead of 1 because you're thinking about last week. All right, so it's a perfect bounce back spot for Miami. It's a revenge game at home versus a team off a bye that historically underperforms on extra rest and has lost games when they have to face a step up in the competition. This is a step up in the competition, folks. I think Miami is a live dog here at home. They're going to be rocking there in Miami in Coral Gables. Give me Miami +3.5, 2.5 unit special.
I agree. Final play, another collaboration play. Pac-12 yet again. As I mentioned, another team off a loss. We're buying UCLA. It's a 2-unit special, 2.5 unit special for the gun at Stanford -17. Some 18s have popped up recently. This is a very, very strong spot. This is what I was talking about when we opened the broadcast. Certain teams are coming off of clusters versus the more difficult portion of their calendar. UCLA comes in here off a loss, not a loss that you're going to say was a bad loss. At Corvallis last Saturday night, 36-24, one of the most difficult travel spots in the Pac-12. Go back 2 weeks prior to that at Utah, another one of the hardest travel spots in the Pac-12. Sandwich in between that, a very impressive win at home against ranked Wazoo. They have played 3 consecutive weeks against ranked Pac-12 opponents. This is where it gets easier. Stanford, Colorado, Arizona, and Arizona State next 4 before they get USC in the second to last game of the regular season. Speaking of Stanford, Stanford comes in here off a ridiculous comeback, down 29-0 at Colorado last Friday night. They came back to win the game. And this is the beauty of fading high. Huge win. The way the game played out made it even more of an emotional high. This is a letdown spot. This is a poor home team. This is a team that lost outright to FCS Sacramento State at home. This is one of the worst Stanford teams in a decade. And this is absolutely a turn-up, get-right spot for UCLA. The numbers all over it. They're laying more on the road this year than they laid last year at home. Buy it, live it, love it, and let's dominate it. Guns, picks, alignment.
Yeah, I had to go pick up my hat. I forgot I threw it on the floor because I got to put this baby back on because we're talking UCLA on this one. I think they smacked the doors off this Stanford Cardinal team. Listen, you already said it. They were down 29-0 versus Colorado on a Friday night and got back, won the game 46-43. They are 2-4 straight up and 3-3 against the spread so far this season. UCLA coming off that loss in Corvallis, 36-34, despite winning the yardage battle in that one. They had a plus 35 net yard average, but -2 turnover ratio was the deciding factor in that one. Now, when you look at Stanford, they're just a team on the rebuild, especially on the defensive side. They give up so many yards, 460 yards per game to their opponent's total offense, 4.6 yards per carry on the ground, and 322 yards passing per game. They also give up 8.3 yards per attempt passing, so that is not good for the Stanford Cardinal defense. Now, with UCLA, they got a freshman quarterback. He's been struggling, especially in the passing game, 51.6% pass completion rate, 7.8 yards per attempt, but they run the ball exceptionally well. Carson Steele, TJ Harden, they both average around 5.3 yards per carry on the ground. So that is positive here, especially when you're going through a Swiss cheese defense that Stanford brings to the table. The biggest strength for UCLA this year is not their offense. It's their defense. They're playing exceptional. Might be the best defense in the Pac-12. They only give up 282 yards per game of total offense to their opponents, 2.3 yards per carry on the ground, 56.4 pass completion rate, 6.3 yards per attempt passing, and they have a 9.7% sack rate. Very good numbers. They've also held 4 out of their 6 opponents to under 300 yards of total offense this season, and they hold their opponents to an average of 104 yards of total offense, 100 yards of offense below the opponent's season average. So when it's triple digits for holding your an opponent's offensive average that low, that's a good damn defense, in my opinion. Also got to look at Stanford. You used to own this matchup with UCLA and has covered and beaten Stanford, but UCLA has covered and beaten Stanford in 3 out of the last 4 meetings. So there is a flip in the in this rivalry here. If you actually look at last year's game, 38-13 as 16.5 point favorites. Now you're seeing the line here at 18, 17, 17.5. I did find the 17 when I first bought this line. But they're on the road this time. They're not at home. Like I said, they were 16.5 point home favorites. Now they're on the road and they're getting more points on this one. Plus, you got to look at Stanford. That was the first time they covered last week was with Colorado. They're 1-6 against the spread after and 8-22 against the spread dating back to 2021. So if you're thinking about this team is due to cover, they already did. They did it last week. They're not due to cover anymore. They're also 2-7 against the spread when Stanford has a rest advantage, which they do, have an extra day on Friday. And then you got Stanford 6-1 against the spread as a away favorite, 5-3 against the spread after a loss. So all the stats, everything is checkbox, checkbox, checkbox. I think UCLA bounces back here versus a bad Stanford team off one of the most impressive road wins, highs of highs. Time to fade that team in the next week. So give me UCLA minus 17, 2.5 units special.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, off a high and a cover. And it's just so interesting because you say to yourself, did they even really cover? And what I mean by that is they still played terribly in the game. And they just played a terrible team that got so high on themselves and just gave up in the second half, basically. So it's like even when they cover because the opponent is so terrible and they're still getting blown out and get situationally fortunate. As you said, this game has blowout written all over it, Guns.
Not only mention, it's like they only threw to one guy that whole game. To get that comeback, there was a guy that had like 19 receptions and 300 yards receiving. That's what happened. It's just Colorado had no answer for him. That's not going to happen with this UCLA defense. I think they're going to blow the doors off them for sure.
Completely agreed. It's the last game on the card tomorrow, 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 Pacific. We are excited and ready to dominate. 4 top plays for me: Texas Tech -3, USC -6.5, 7, Miami, Florida +3, and UCLA -17, 2-unit special. The Gun 6-pack of plays, Week 8 knowledge for college. Arkansas at noon in the SEC -5.5. 2 MAC plays in the middle of the afternoon. Akron +7.5. And Northern Illinois 11.5, 12.5. Now collaboration play USC -6.5. A 3-unit special for the Gun. Miami, Florida at home. Get off this nonsensical schneid +3, 3.5. And the late night special -6 and -17.5, -17 UCLA. A pleasure doing the show with you, Guns. As always, sending you guys all the best vibes on this Friday night, October 20th. 2023. We appreciate you guys clicking, interacting, and desiring to dominate with us always. The goal of the show is to bring conversation, a hype level, which both of us work super hard to do, and of course, the top picks and analysis. Guns picks, close them out with some words, and let's dominate.
Yeah, we went a little bit late tonight. Old Guns had some oblos he had to go deal with, but listen, this show is scheduled for 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. On the regular on Friday, so just get that in your head right now. This is a special time only for this week. And also, you got to check me out tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time with Saturday mornings with Guns Picks. Bring your coffee, bring your booze, bring your breakfast Sammys, Taylor ham, bacon, whatever you want on it. And also going to be joined with, I had to bring the boys back one more time, the Connor Mack and Pimp Slap himself, Mike M, because those guys bring the Saturday energy that I need. And it's going to be an electric show, so please join us for that. You bring the plays, we'll bring the opinions, we'll talk everything. Plus, I'll give you some added plays as well as the show goes along. So please go check that out. And of course, Sunday, Circa Million Show will be back. Listen, we killed the card last week. It was an absolute pure domination from every single one of us. So you have to be with us now. The sharpest channel on the planet, Sharky Waters Nation. So like and subscribe. And hit the bell so you know every time we go live. So that's going to do it for this show, Knowledge for College, college football preview show. Till next time, I'll see you in the morning, 10 a.m. to talk a little bit more college football. Sorry, I'm getting a little ahead of myself with college basketball, but that's going to do it. Let's cash some tickets. And as always, let's keep dancing. Bang.